Hi everybody, I'm Missi Matthews. Welcome to Steelers Live and welcome inside the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex. It was a busy week here for the Pittsburgh Steelers with the start of the new league year and the start of free agency. And joining me today from the DVE Morning Show and of Steelers.com, Mike Prisuta. And Triv, when you look at the additions and the guys the Steelers kept, something we are used to, it was crazy. It is something that is out of character and not what we see from the Steelers, but the dust has settled. We are in week 2 of free agency. What's your biggest takeaway now that you've had a minute to sit back and say, okay, here's what they did?
You know, it's the same takeaway as I had immediately after they announced this avalanche of free agent signings. Enthusiasm, in one word, Missi. When they brought these guys in last week, Mitch Trubisky and James Daniel and Miles Jack and Mason Cole and Levi Wallace, we're talking about veteran players here who are established players. These guys have played in the league. They've started in the league. They were elated to be here, and they felt incredibly energized by getting the chance to join the Steelers. You know, Miles Jack talked about getting a phone call from Mike Tomlin. That's all I needed to hear. Sign me up. You know, Mitch Trubisky said he was looking around and Pittsburgh was where he wanted to go all along. Mason Cole came in and talked about how excited he was going to be to get a shot at blocking for Najee Harris. I mean, these guys want to be here. I think the Steelers wanted them as much as they wanted the Steelers. And in free agency, you can't have a better marriage than that, right? I can remember Mike Tomlin talking about energy givers all the way back to the Antoine Randall L days. And I think they've checked a lot of boxes with these guys. They've addressed positions of need. They've got, in several cases, accomplished, established players. And they've got guys who I think are going to be good locker room guys, good teammates, energy givers, energy bringers. It was really something to get to a first introduction to those guys as Steelers last week. Their reaction told me a great deal.
Yeah, like you said, addressing those positions, especially along the offensive line. Chuks Okorafor was able to test the waters. He stayed here in Pittsburgh and got himself a 3-year deal with the Steelers. And only 2 subtractions, Joe Schobert and Zach Banner, their contracts were terminated. But Triv, that was after they signed other guys. You know, usually we are seeing contracts terminated or guys cut prior to the new league year. So that is also something different in terms of, you know, maybe getting what they would consider an upgrade before releasing players.
Missi, you may not know anything about this or understand this, but when you go shopping, it's always easier to pay cash than run up your credit card. And they had some cash to spend, and they had some options. And turns out they know how to do that. It's not necessarily what they're noted for, but I think as we've seen for several seasons now, what people perceive to be the Steelers' way of doing things has become a lot more flexible and a lot more adjustable than in years past. You got to, Kevin Colbert has talked about as much. You got to keep up with the game, right? If you're not keeping up, you're being left behind. So I thought it was encouraging from that aspect as well. You know, I heard a lot of speculation heading into free agency about, well, they're going to wait. You know what they do. They wait till the third day and get a bargain and get a relatively unheralded guy. And then, what was it, an hour into the free agent legal tampering period or whatever they were calling it, they had a new quarterback. Different times, to say the least, but exciting times, I think.
All right, well, I like how enthusiastic you are. I know you said the new group of guys coming in were enthusiastic as well. If you had to pick one, Triv, who's the guy you think will make the most immediate impact on the Steelers roster?
I think it's going to be Mitch Trubisky. I think he's going to end up being the quarterback, and I think he not only was looking for the opportunity that the Steelers are providing. Mike Tomlin had been talking about mobility in a quarterback since after the bye week last season. Talked about it again after the season ended. Art Rooney talked about it. Kevin Colbert talked about it. And, boy, is it going to be, I'll use the word fascinating because that's what I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be fascinating to see what Mitch Trubisky can do with his physical skill set applied to what Matt Canada wants the quarterback position to be able to do, and how Matt Canada believes quarterback ought to be played. I don't know that there was a marriage last year between what the coordinator favors and what the current starter was capable of doing, and I thought they really worked together as best they could. They got a lot of mileage out of a year where things didn't necessarily all line up the way they wanted them to. Made the playoffs. A lot of good things happened, but I think this coming season is going to be the one where we see what Matt Canada's had in mind, and I think Mitch Trubisky is going to be the facilitator of that.
All right, going over to the defensive side of the ball, there are still a number of free agents out there across the league, the Steelers included, and this is kind of the wait-and-see period that you were talking about being in week 2, but we have Ahkello Witherspoon, somebody who came on late and really helped the Steelers out towards the end of the season, and also Terrell Edmunds, who has been a starter since he came here as a first-round draft pick to Pittsburgh. Do you think they're going to maybe go with another team? Do you think there's still a chance the Steelers can lure them back?
Oh, I certainly think there's a chance. I mean, it depends on how you want to look at it, glass half empty or glass half full. If you could say if they were that in demand, they'd already be signed somewhere else, right? Or you could say, well, Steelers wanted them that bad, they would have brought them back already. But I think both of those guys would be great fits from where I'm sitting. I think, Terrell Edmunds, I thought last year was his best year. And I know a lot of people might perceive him as a guy who hasn't necessarily lived up to, first-round pick billing. But he has played a lot of football for the Steelers, a lot of snaps. I think he's gotten better. I think that stability in the secondary would be a significant get. And you mentioned Witherspoon. He got everybody's attention last season, did he not? He seems to have the physical skill set. This guy's got some bona fides. He's a former third-round pick. He's been in the league. And cornerback seems to be a position that's in a little bit of flux. So at this point, if I'm calling the shots, I'm trying to bring as much stability to the picture as I can. I've made a splash, bringing in some guys from outside. Now I want to kind of tie up the bows, dot the I's, cross the T's with known commodities.
All right, on my color-coded list of free agency tracker that I have, the only guys I crossed off that were Steelers free agents are all wide receivers: Juju Smith-Schuster, Ray McLeod, James Washington. They decided to go elsewhere. Are you concerned about the depth at that position right now?
First off, I want to tell you how proud I am of you that you held up a piece of paper and not your phone. You actually wrote stuff
old
down.
School, yeah.
Old school's the best school. So good on you for that. I'm going to miss Juju Smith-Schuster. I really am. I'm not a social media fan. I don't pretend to understand what goes on there. I don't think it was much, if any, of a factor in what happened. I don't think dancing on logos is all that significant, the big picture, whether that occurs or not. I'll tell you, Missi, when I think of Juju Schuster, the first thing that pops into my head is that play against the Ravens a couple of years ago when it was 3rd and 2 and they threw him a sideways pass and he caught it behind the line of scrimmage and he put his shoulder down and he ran through one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL and he moved the chains. And that was the kind of football Juju Smith-Schuster played. In my eyes, you could put him up against a Marlon Humphrey caliber player with a lot on the line at a critical juncture of a pivotal game. And you were happy to take your chances with Juju Smith-Schuster. He played a tough guy receiver, and I think that is going to be challenging to replace. There are a lot of guys in the draft again this year. There have been for several years now. The colleges are throw. They're developing receivers. They're developing corners. They're developing pass rushers, offensive tackles also. But the Juju Smith-Schuster departure is attention-getting to me. I think Ray McLeod has already been replaced. Gunnar Olszewski should fit in nicely in that role. And James Washington, I think he was a hard worker and he had some moments, but maybe not enough to make me miss him, at least not just yet, Missi.
All right, now in terms of looking ahead, as we said, the draft coming up the end of April, we're still in that free agency period where you can wait and see. But I think the Steelers know, looking ahead, maybe closer to training camp, the regular season, like TJ Watt last year, you have Minkah Fitzpatrick and possibly Deontay Johnson as well. Do you think the Steelers are keeping that in mind as they are waiting and seeing what plays out in free agency across the league?
Yeah, I think so, particularly in Minkah's case, right? Because that's going to be probably TJ Watt-esque in terms of the gravity of the deal, the complex nature of the deal, the timing that's going to be involved in that. Although with, what's going on with Tyreek Hill and some other wide receivers,
Devontae Adams,
Deontay Johnson, maybe that's going to be a little more complicated than I'm anticipating right about now. But I would suspect they have a good handle on that and an approximation. And in terms of adding anybody before the draft, Can I have Terrell Edmonds and Ahkello Witherspoon back?
Yeah, you've mentioned it, but I like that. I think everybody would agree that bringing them back would be a great thing. You know, having Terrell Austin promoted as the defensive coordinator, somebody those guys are very familiar with, and bringing on Brian Flores, I think there is a lot of excitement around the Steelers defense right now.
Yeah, and that would also give you even more of a broad base going into the draft. You know, they're not in a position. They don't have to go get a quarterback. They don't have to go get an offensive lineman. They don't have to go get an inside linebacker. Maybe they will, you know, but if they do, it'll be because it's what they want to do at the time, the way the board played out, however they make their decisions, but they can make them freely and not under any kind of pressure. The rosters start to fill out nicely. You can get that secondary a little more secure. It's going to give you even more options come late April.
And with the sunshine outside, people walking along the river here at the Steelers facility, I know you're probably looking forward to some OTAs and minicamp if those are in play this year.
Oh, God help me, I am, Missy. I really am. It's going to be, I mean, this has been really way more interesting than the offseason usually is already. I think, you know, the dynamic of the team in transition away from Ben Roethlisberger, that's something that, you know, they haven't experienced this kind of shift in the landscape for 18 years. And I think that's going to add a little uncertainty. And as Bill Cowher used to say once in a while, Missy, uncertainty is not a bad thing, or words to that effect. You know, you get a little motivated, you get a little sharper, you get a little more on edge. And I'll be very curious to see how they move this thing forward. And what better place than on the south side during an OTA while a choo-choo train's going by.
All right, well, stay tuned. All right, Tripp, thanks so much for joining me today. That's going to do it for this edition of Steelers Live. Have a great night and a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you next time.